The signs in the desert.
I could hear my own heartbeat slowing down. The sound was heavy, like waves crashing in my ears. My vision blurred, and the burning heat of the Saudi desert wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I thought it was my last day on earth, but I did not know that God had planned something far bigger for me. My name is Miguel Santos, a Filipino archaeologist and researcher. I had come to Saudi Arabia chasing a mystery from the Bible. I wanted to see if the stories I grew up hearing in Sunday school could still be found in the dust and stones of this land. I never expected that my search for the truth would lead me to the edge of death, and that edge would open my eyes to signs I could no longer ignore. The desert was quiet that morning, too quiet. No wind, no movement, just an endless horizon of sand. Our team had been working for weeks, searching for clues connected to the Exodus. We had dived in the Red Sea, mapped strange shapes under the water, and heard whispers from locals about an ancient mountain blackened by fire. Still, nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness, or for the moment when my life would hang by a thread in the middle of God's creation. The first time I stood at the edge of Nuweiba Beach, I felt a strange pull inside me. The waves rolled gently, hiding secrets older than any empire. Across the water lay the coast of Saudi Arabia, and between us stretched a mystery that had divided historians for centuries. Was this the real place where Moses and the Israelites crossed the sea, or was it just another legend kept alive by faith? We brought underwater drones and diving gear. Rafael Cruz, my teammate and cameraman, prepared the equipment while I checked our oxygen tanks. The sun was already punishing us even in the early morning, but we had no choice. The water here was different from other parts of the Red Sea. Calmer, shallower, almost inviting us to step in. Yet I knew that beneath the calm surface lay answers that could shake the world. As we descended into the blue, my heart pounded faster, not from fear, but from the feeling that we were touching history. The seafloor revealed something extraordinary, a natural ridge stretching across like a giant bridge hidden under 33 meters of water. It was wide, gently sloping on both sides. Nothing like the steep drop-offs common in the Red Sea. I imagined the water pulled back, exposing this path, and a crowd of thousands walking across with walls of water rising on both sides. My breathing grew heavier as I realized how perfectly this matched the account in Exodus 14. Then I saw them, coral formations shaped like wheels, some with clear outlines of hubs and spokes, frozen in time. Nature had grown over them, covering metal that had long since decayed, but the shapes were undeniable. My mind raced. What if these were the remains of Egyptian chariots, the very ones that chased the Israelites? My gloves touched one of the formations, and a shiver ran through me, not because of the cold, but because I knew I was looking at a piece of the story that had survived thousands of years. Raphael's voice came through the comms, his tone trembling with excitement. He had found another wheel shape, this one partially buried in the sand. Our metal detector picked up faint traces of bronze and iron alloys, materials that matched ancient Egyptian weaponry. I felt torn between documenting everything and just staring in awe. We took as many images and measurements as possible before surfacing, each photo a silent witness to something far greater than us. After the dive, we showed the footage to Dr. Grace Villanueva, a geologist from our team. She confirmed that the ridge was a rare geological feature, a perfectly natural land bridge that could have been exposed under the right conditions. Yet she admitted that the coral shapes were highly unusual, too symmetrical to be random. She looked at me and said quietly, "Miguel, if this is what we think it is, it changes everything." The next stage of our journey took us inland to the rugged wilderness of northwest Saudi Arabia. The locals called it Jabal al-lawz, the mountain of almonds, but some whispered another name, the true Mount Sinai. As we approached, its blackened peak came into view, standing stark against the pale desert sky. It looked as if fire from heaven had rested on its summit. Even from a distance, I felt a strange reverence, like stepping into a place where heaven and earth once met. We hiked toward the base, the air dry and sharp in my lungs. The rocks under our boots shifted with every step. When we finally reached the summit area, I could see that the black color was only on the surface. Breaking a rock revealed untouched granite inside. This was not volcanic. It was as if the stones had been scorched in a single moment. Dr. Grace whispered the verse from Exodus 19. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. At the foot of the mountain lay a wide plain, enough to hold a multitude. I could imagine the Israelites camped here, tents stretching to the horizon, waiting for Moses to return. Nearby stood a large formation of uncut stones, arranged in a way that matched the biblical command for an altar. I walked slowly around it, tracing the weathered edges with my fingers. On nearby boulders, faint carvings of bulls and calves emerged from the stone, their lines eroded but still clear. The connection to the golden calf incident was undeniable. Not far from the altar, we found piles of ancient animal bones, some from species suitable for sacrifice. I remembered the account in Exodus 32, when about 3,000 men fell in judgment for worshipping the calf. The weight of that history pressed on me. I tried to picture the noise, The shouting, the clash of swords, and the cries of those who realized too late the cost of turning away from God. The wind carried fine sand across my boots, whispering a warning that seemed to reach across time. Sheikh Ibrahim, our local guide, told us in a low voice that access to this site had been restricted for years. Fences and guards kept most people away. Some believed it was to protect history, others thought it was to hide it. I felt a mix of frustration and gratitude. Frustration that so few could see this place, and gratitude that God had allowed me to stand here, to witness these stones and remember what they represented. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the shadows grew long, the air cooled, and I stood silently facing the blackened peak. I thought of how God's presence once descended here, not as a gentle breeze, but as consuming fire. The same God who parted seas, who gave commandments carved in stone, and who called his people to holiness. I realized that these discoveries were not just proof of history, they were reminders of covenant, judgment, and mercy all in one. The stones cried out their testimony, and I knew we had only just begun to uncover what they had to say. It was supposed to be another dry day in the desert, the kind of day when the air feels like it could strip the moisture from your skin in minutes. But God had something else prepared. I woke up to the sound of distant thunder, a strange sound in this part of Saudi Arabia. By mid-morning, clouds rolled in thick and dark, and the horizon shimmered with a silver light. Raphael came running into the tent, saying, "Miguel, you need to see this." We stepped outside, and the air was alive with a scent I had not smelled in weeks. The smell of rain. Heavy drops began to fall on the sand, darkening it in patches. The wind picked up, carrying the coolness of water across the plain. Within minutes, the desert was transformed. Streams began to form, trickling through the dry channels. The sand drank greedily, and small pools appeared where moments before there had only been dust. Then the real miracle began. By the second day, green shoots pushed through the ground, scattered at first, then multiplying. The barren land softened into carpets of grass. Tiny flowers began to bloom, painting the desert floor with splashes of white, yellow, and purple. Camels grazed where only sand had been. It was as if the prophecy in Isaiah 35 had come to life before my eyes. The wilderness and the wasteland shall be glad, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. The transformation was not just beautiful, it was unsettling. This was not supposed to happen here. At least not like this. Locals told us they had never seen anything this dramatic. Old men in the village shook their heads in disbelief. Some called it a blessing. Others whispered that it was a sign of the end times. I could not help but remember the words of the Prophet Muhammad as recorded in Islamic tradition. The land of Arabia will return to meadows and rivers. It was as if prophecy from two faiths was converging on this one patch of earth. But the rain had one more surprise. 3 days later, the clouds returned, this time darker and heavier. The wind roared through the valley, bringing with it hail, at first small, like grains of rice, then larger, the size of marbles, then golf balls, pounding the tents, the vehicles, and the sand. The temperature dropped sharply, and the desert turned white. The sight was surreal, dunes and plains covered in a layer of ice. The sun broke through briefly, making the ground sparkle like a frozen sea. I walked out into it, crunching through ice in the middle of the desert, my breath misting in the cold air. Then something even stranger happened. The hail began to melt, and rivers of icy water carved channels through the sand, flowing past our feet, carrying chunks of ice toward the lowlands. Camels stood knee-deep in the freezing streams, their eyes wide, as if they too could not understand what was happening. The locals called me over to a ridge where the water was flowing fastest. It was like a river of silver cutting through gold, a sight so foreign to this land that it felt like stepping into another world. I thought of the plagues in Egypt, of hail as a sign of judgment. I thought of Revelation, where hailstones are described falling in the last days, and I felt a chill deeper than the cold air around me. Then came the sandfall, a phenomenon I had only seen in videos before. The storm winds lifted sand high into the air, pushing it toward the cliffs. When it hit the rock face, it poured down like liquid, cascading in slow motion. The sun caught the grains as they fell, turning them into a golden waterfall. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time, the kind of sight that makes you stand still and think about how small you really are. Not all the desert's fury was beautiful. The same storm system brought a dust storm 2 days later. The sky turned copper red, the sun became a dim disk, and the air thickened with grit. Breathing became difficult. Even inside the tents, the wind howled like a living thing, shaking the metal poles. I thought of the typhoons back home in the Philippines, of families clinging to rooftops, of the strange way nature can give life one moment and take it the next. When the storm finally passed, the land was changed again. Patches of green still dotted the valley, but much of it was buried under drifts of sand. The rivers of ice had vanished, leaving behind strange patterns in the ground, like scars of a battle between fire and frost. Sheikh Ibrahim told us that in his 60 years, he had never seen all these events happen in one season. His voice was quiet when he said, "God is speaking through his creation. The question is whether anyone is listening." Standing there, I realized that this desert was not dead. It was alive in a way most people would never believe unless they saw it. It could bloom like a garden, freeze like the Arctic, and burn like an oven, all within days. It was a place of extremes, a place that could show you the beauty of life and the fragility of it in the same breath. And maybe that was the point. Maybe it was meant to remind us that the world can change in an instant, just as our own lives can. As the sun set over the newly green hills and the blackened peak of Jabal al-lawz, I felt the weight of what I had witnessed. This was not just weather, not just rare events. These were signs, patterns, echoes of something written long ago, something that was now unfolding before our very eyes. And the desert, in its silence, seemed to be calling us to pay attention before it was too late. That night I could not sleep. The images of the green desert, the rivers of ice, and the blackened mountain kept playing in my mind. I sat outside the tent staring at the stars. The air was cool, almost cold, and the silence was so deep that I could hear my own breathing. I began to remember verses I had learned as a boy in Sunday school back in Manila. Matthew 24, Luke 21, Isaiah 35, each one speaking of signs in nature before the return of the Lord. The words of Matthew came first. Nation will rise against nation, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. I thought about the wars filling the headlines, the diseases that had swept the world, the earthquakes that had shaken islands in my own country, and now here I was, in the middle of a desert that was blooming, freezing, and roaring all within days. Was this another piece of the same puzzle? Then Luke's warning echoed, "There will be fearful events and great signs from heaven. Look up, for your redemption is drawing near." The thought made my chest tighten. I was looking up now, but not at the sky for a sign. I was looking up to remember who it was that made the sky, the one who holds history in his hands, and who told us to be ready when the world begins to shake in ways it never has before. I walked to the ridge where I could see the plain at the base of Jabal al-lawz, the same place where the Israelites might have camped, the altar still standing, the carvings of the golden calf still faintly visible. I imagined Moses coming down from the mountain, his face glowing with the presence of God, only to find his people bowing to an idol. The contrast was painful. God's glory at the top, human rebellion at the bottom, and judgment in between. It struck me how much that story still matches the world today. Back home, I had seen the idols of our age. They are not made of gold or stone, but they are just as dangerous. The idol of greed that corrupts leaders, the idol of pleasure that destroys families, the idol of self that refuses to bow to anything greater. We may not carve calves anymore, but we still build altars to our own desires. And we still dance around them as if they can save us. Standing in this ancient place made me realize that the same spiritual sickness repeats itself in every generation. Isaiah's vision came next. The desert shall rejoice and blossom as the rose. It will blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. It was a beautiful promise, and I had seen it with my own eyes in the green valleys that were once bare. But I also remembered that Isaiah's prophecy was not just about nature. It was about renewal, about the coming of God's kingdom, about the time when justice would flow like a river and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Could it be that these changes in the land were whispers of that coming day? I thought about the people who would laugh at the idea, who would say these are just rare weather patterns or geological coincidences. I understood them, because for years I had been the same. I had chosen to explain away the strange, to push God to the background, to keep my world safe and predictable. But standing here now, having seen what I had seen, I could not go back to that kind of blindness. I felt as if the desert itself had reached into my chest and pulled away the covering from my eyes. Sheikh Ibrahim came and stood beside me. He did not say anything for a while. Then he asked, "Do you think these are the signs your holy book speaks of?" I told him I could not be certain, but I believed they could be. He nodded slowly and said, "In my faith, too, we are told to watch, to be ready, because when the signs come, they will come quickly. And only those who are prepared will understand what they mean." His words felt heavy, like stones I could not put down. We stood there as the first light of dawn touched the peak of the mountain, turning it gold for a moment before the black returned. It was like watching a prophecy in miniature, glory shining for a brief time before the darkness tried to take it back. I thought of how many people will miss the signs because they are too busy, too distracted, or too proud to admit that God might be speaking. The Bible wants us not to be like that, to keep watch, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when we do not expect him. That morning I wrote in my journal, "Not every storm or discovery is a sign of the end. But the more I see, the more I believe that God is allowing the earth to speak to us, to shake us awake before it is too late." The greening of the desert, the rivers of ice, the blackened mountain, the altar of the golden calf. They are not just history or nature. They are sermons written into creation. And we would be fools to ignore them. As we prepared to move to our next site, I knew that part of me was already changed. I could no longer look at the desert as empty land. I saw it now as a stage where God had acted before and might act again, a place where his power had been revealed, and perhaps where it would be revealed once more. The question was not whether the signs were real. The question was whether we would recognize them when they appeared right in front of us. The more I thought about the signs, the more I realized something dangerous. Signs can be twisted. They can be used not to draw people closer to God, but to pull them away. It is what the Bible calls the great deception, and once you have seen how convincing it can be, you will never look at the world the same way again. When I was younger, I believed that deception was easy to spot. I thought false teachers would look obviously wrong, that false prophets would wear their lies on their faces. But the truth is more frightening. The great deception is beautiful, persuasive, and almost true. It takes pieces of truth and bends them just enough to point you away from the real source of life. It promises hope but delivers slavery. It speaks of light but hides the darkness inside. As we shared our findings online, I began to see how quickly people could twist them. Some took the images of the chariot wheels and claimed they were proof of alien visitations. Others said the blackened mountain was the site of ancient advanced technology. There were even a few who tried to use our discoveries to sell their own prophecy dates, telling people they knew exactly when the end of the world would come. I felt sick reading those posts, because I knew how easily a desperate heart can grab onto the wrong hope. Thessalonians 2 warns us, the coming of the lawless one will be in accordance with the work of Satan, displayed in all kinds of counterfeit miracles, signs and wonders, and in every sort of evil that deceives those who are perishing. That word counterfeit struck me. It means it looks like the real thing. It feels like the real thing. But it is meant to take you away from the truth, not toward it. I saw that happening in real time on the internet, in conversation, in the media, and it chilled me more than the icy rivers in the desert. In the Philippines, we know about false saviors. We have seen leaders rise to power promising change and deliverance, only to bring more corruption and suffering. We have seen voices on social media promise justice but deliver division. It is not always political. Sometimes it is cultural. The idol of celebrity, the blind worship of wealth, the idea that your worth depends on how many followers you have. All of these are deceptions that seem harmless at first, but they feed the same pride and rebellion that turned the Israelites toward the golden calf at the foot of Mount Sinai. Sheikh Ibrahim told me a story one evening about a trader in the old days who would mix gold dust with sand to make it look like he had more. He would sell it to travelers who thought they were buying pure treasure, but when they reached home, they found most of it worthless. He said, Miguel, the enemy of your soul does the same thing. He mixes lies with truth, so that by the time you discover the difference, it is too late. His words stayed with me. I thought about the young people I had met in Manila before this trip, some of them searching for meaning, others drowning in hopelessness. I imagined them seeing a false prophet online, someone with a smooth voice and convincing sign, offering them purpose and belonging. I imagined how easy it would be to follow that voice if you were not grounded in the Word of God. If you did not know the shepherd's voice, you could mistake the voice of the thief for the voice of the Savior. The deception will not always look evil. Sometimes it will look kind, progressive, intelligent. Sometimes it will tell you that you can keep your idols and still have peace with God. Sometimes it will tell you that truth changes with time, that the Bible is only a human book. Sometimes it will tell you that the end is coming on a specific date, so you should follow the one who claims to have the calendar. The danger is that people want certainty more than they want God, and that hunger for control makes them easy prey. I realized then that part of my calling in being here was not just to document the signs, but to warn about the lies. The Bible says God allows a strong delusion to come on those who refuse to love the truth. That is a terrifying thought, that God himself will let people believe the lie because they have already rejected his voice. I prayed that night for my own heart, that I would love the truth more than I loved my comfort, my plans, or my pride. The great deception is not coming. It is already here. It is in the way we justify sin because it is convenient, in the way we choose leaders who speak what we want to hear instead of what we need to hear. It is in the way we treat the news like a gospel and the gospel like news from a far country. It is in the way we scroll past suffering because it interrupts our entertainment. And if we are not careful, we will wake up one day and realize we have been worshipping at the wrong altar without even knowing it. That night, as the wind moved softly through the camp, I asked myself a hard question. Miguel, if the real Christ and a false Christ stood in front of you, how sure are you that you would know the difference? I knew the answer depended on one thing, whether I truly knew him, his voice, his ways, his word. The only safety in the time of the great deception is intimacy with the one who is the truth. Everything else can be faked, but the presence of God cannot. I closed my journal with a prayer. Lord, let me not be fooled by beauty without holiness, by signs without your spirit, by promises without your cross. Let me see the counterfeit for what it is, and let me speak boldly so that others can see it too. Because in the days ahead, the desert will not be the only place where truth and lies meet face to face. The turning point for me came unexpectedly. We were on our way back from documenting another section of the plain when the wind began to rise. At first, it was just a whisper across the sand. Then it grew into a roar that drowned out our voices. Within minutes, the air was thick with dust, stinging my eyes and burning my throat. Sheikh Ibrahim shouted for us to take cover, but before I could move, the world turned into a blur of red and gold. I tried to run toward the vehicle, but the sandstorm swallowed everything. My lungs felt like they were filling with fire. Each breath was harder than the last. The heat pressed in from all sides. My vision narrowed, and then the strength drained from my legs. I fell to my knees, coughing, clutching my chest. Somewhere in the roar, I heard Raphael calling my name, but it sounded far away, as if he was on the other side of a wall. The ground tilted under me, or maybe I was tilting. My hands sank into the hot sand. My head grew heavy, and then there was silence. No wind, no heat, no weight. I was standing in a light so pure it felt alive. I could not see its source, but it filled everything around me. And deep inside me, I felt a presence I had not known so closely before. A voice spoke without sound. Miguel, you have seen the signs. Now you must tell them. Warn them. There was no fear, only a deep, steady peace, like water on thirsty ground. I do not know how long I was there, but suddenly the light faded, and the roar of the wind returned. I opened my eyes to find myself in the arms of two men pulling me toward the shelter of a tent. My throat ached, my head pounded, and I could barely speak. Someone poured water over my face and into my mouth, and I gasped for air as if I had been under the sea. The storm passed not long after, leaving the camp scattered with debris and half-buried equipment. At the field hospital that night, lying on a narrow cot, I could not stop thinking about what I had heard. The voice had been clear, the call urgent. It was not just about archaeology or science anymore. It was about the state of our souls, about the danger of ignoring what God was trying to show us. I thought about my own life, the compromises I had made, the times I had chosen my work over my family, my ambition over my obedience, and I felt a deep need to make things right. Spiritual readiness is not a feeling, it is a choice. It is waking up each day and deciding that God's will matters more than mine. It is refusing to keep idols, even the invisible ones like pride or fear. It is living as if the king could return at any moment, because he could. I realized that I had been so focused on finding physical evidence of God's acts in history that I had neglected the evidence of his work in my own heart. The Bible tells us to watch and pray, to keep our lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, ready to open the door when he knocks. I knew that if I was going to tell others to be ready, I had to be ready myself. That meant reconciling with people I had wronged, forgiving those who had hurt me, and letting go of the secret sins I had excused for too long. The next morning, I walked outside before dawn. The sky was deep blue, the first light just touching the horizon. I prayed out loud for the first time in weeks. Not the polished prayers I sometimes used in public, but raw, honest words. Lord, I have been chasing proof of you in the stones, but I need you to carve your truth into my heart. Help me live in a way that pleases you. Help me warn others with love and courage, and keep me from being silent when I should speak. That prayer changed the way I moved through the rest of our work. I stopped thinking only about the next discovery and started looking for the next opportunity to share the truth. Sometimes it was with the local workers who asked why we were here. Sometimes with strangers who saw our photos online. Sometimes with my own team during the quiet moments between travel. I found that readiness was not just about expecting the end. It was about living fully in the present, with every action anchored in eternity. I thought of the parable of the 10 virgins, how 5 were ready and 5 were not. The only difference was preparation. Oil in the lamp before the cry came at midnight. I did not want to be caught without oil, without light. When the time came, I wanted to be found faithful, even in the small things, even when no one was watching. Because readiness is built in the hidden moments, long before the trumpet sounds. By the time we packed our gear to leave the site, I felt a new sense of purpose. The voice I had heard in the storm still echoed in my mind. Tell them, warn them. And I knew this was not just for strangers across the world. It was for my own people, my own family, my own neighbors. The signs in the desert were real, but so was the darkness creeping into our homes, our schools, our streets. And the call was to shine the light before it was too late. That night before departure, I stood at the edge of the camp, looking at the stars one last time. I whispered, Lord, I am ready. Send me where you want. Use my voice, my story, whatever I have. Just let me be faithful to the end. The wind was gentle now, almost like an answer, carrying the scent of the desert, the green, the water, the fire, and the memory of the light that had once surrounded me when I thought my life was over. I knew then that my mission had only just begun. When I finally arrived back in Manila, the noise of the city felt overwhelming. The streets were alive with honking jeepneys, shouting vendors, and the rush of people chasing their own small urgencies. But inside me, everything was slower, heavier. The desert had changed my pace, my priorities, my eyes. The first thing I did was visit my parents. They had been worried when they heard about the storm. My mother held me for a long time without saying a word. When she finally let go, she looked at me and said, "You are different." Miguel, her voice was not accusing. It was curious, and I realized she was right. I had come back with something I did not leave with, a burden, a message, and a love for people that I could not explain except to say that God had put it there. One afternoon, I sat at the small table in my apartment, holding a photo of my daughter. She was smiling in her school uniform, missing one front tooth. I thought about how close I had come to never seeing that smile again. I thought about how I had almost traded her future for my ambition, and I felt my eyes burn. I prayed right there. Lord, help me to be the father she needs, not just a provider, but a guide toward you. Help me to leave her a legacy that is worth more than anything I could buy. I began to write letters, not emails, not messages, but actual letters to my siblings, to old friends I had lost touch with, to people I had hurt. Each letter carried the same heart. I am sorry where I failed you. I am grateful for you, and I want you to know that life is too short to live without peace, without forgiveness, without God. I wrote until my hand ached, and with every letter I felt lighter, as if the desert wind was passing through my heart, clearing away the dust. The discoveries in Saudi Arabia were incredible, but I realized that the greatest discovery I made was not buried under the sea or hidden on a mountain. It was buried under my own pride, my own fear. And it was the simple truth that life is a gift, and faith is not something to be stored away for special occasion. It is the only compass that works when the storms come. It is the only anchor when the waves rise. If I could stand in front of every person who will hear my story, I would tell them this: you do not have to face death to start living right. You do not have to see miracles in the desert to believe in the God who makes them. But you do have to decide today, now, who you will follow and what you will build your life on. Because there will come a day when the sand shifts under your feet and the air grows thin. And on that day, only one foundation will stand. I tell you, as someone who has seen the beauty and the terror of the earth in the same place, who has felt the fire and the ice, who has heard the voice that cuts through the wind. The signs are real, the warnings are real, and so is the hope. You can live ready, you can live forgiven, you can live free, but it will not happen by accident. It will happen when you choose the one who is the way, the truth, and the life. When I close my eyes at night now, I sometimes still see the blackened peak of Jabal al-lawz against the stars. I see the altar, the carvings, the green valley, and the rivers of ice. But more than that, I see faces, the faces of people I love, people I pray for, people I may never meet. And I whisper the same thing I whispered in the desert. Lord, let them be ready, let them see, let them know you before it is too late. If you are hearing this, please understand, this is not just a story about me. This is about all of us. It is about the deserts we walk through in our own lives, the storms that threaten to take us down, and the miracles that God places in our path to wake us up. I am not special. I'm just someone who was given another chance, and I do not want to waste it. I do not want you to waste yours either. If this story has reached your heart, do not let it end here. Share it with someone who needs to hear the warning and the hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments so we can stand together in this conversation. And most of all, subscribe to this channel so you will not miss what comes next. The signs are appearing. The time is short, and your voice matters. Be part of this journey. Be ready, and help others be ready too.